the world is getting really crazy. In recent weeks, dozens of missiles have been launched against cargo ships crossing the Red Sea, and the perpetrators of these launches are the Houthis, an insurgent group living in Yemen. But why are they attacking the ships? Who exactly are the Houthis? Is it allowed to attack international maritime traffic? And can these people wearing sandals manufacture their own missiles, or is someone providing them? In this video, we will understand what is exactly happening in the Red Sea with the ships, the missiles, and the Yemeni Houthis. Let's begin. The first thing we need to understand is that Yemen is currently a failed state that has been in civil war for a decade. And that war is a damn chaos. Because no, there are not two opposing sides but four. On one hand, there is the theoretically legitimate government of Yemen, which only controls the area called Southern Yemen and seeks to unify the country. On the other hand, there are the Houthis, who seek to separate the northern region of Yemen from the rest of Yemen. Additionally, there is the Southern Transitional Council, which seeks the independence of southern Yemen. And there are also numerous Al-Qaeda groups seeking, well, the typical Al-Qaeda stuff. And these four factions are engaged in a bloody civil war that basically boils down to everyone against everyone else. And, well, you might think that if the Houthis want independence in the north, and those of the Southern Transitional Council want the same for the south, they should be allies and join forces against the Yemeni government, right? Well, not quite. Because for starters, they can't agree on the border. Right on the border, there are oil wells, and everyone wants them for themselves. And on the other hand, Al-Qaeda adheres to the Sunni doctrine of Islam, and the Houthis are Shia. So, you might think that maybe Al-Qaeda is allied with the other two factions against the Houthis. Makes sense, right? Well, not really. Because even though the southern Yemenis and the Al-Qaeda terrorists are Sunnis, Al-Qaeda wants to establish an Islamic caliphate, but the people of the south don't want to go that far. But what are these Sunnis and Shia? As you can see, everything is very complex, and territorial, economic, and religious motives are intertwined. In this map, you can see the countries with Islamic populations. The lighter the color, as in Cameroon, means there are fewer Muslims, and the darker the color, as in Saudi Arabia, means there is a higher percentage, and almost the entire map is in green. But you may have noticed that there are two other colors. Well, that's because each color represents the three main branches of Islam. It's like with Christianity, where everyone believes in Jesus and such. But there are divisions among Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants, because each group has different interpretations of Islam. So in green are the Sunnis, who are the majority branch, and in red are the Shiites, who are the second most important group. And while nowadays Christians all get along and don't argue over religion, you probably know that in the past there were wars for religious reasons. For example, the 30 Years' War, which ravaged Europe, pitting Catholics against Protestants. Well, in the Islamic world, that still happens. And Sunnis and Shiites are at each other's throats. In fact, as you can see, Iraq is a country with a very divided population. 1/3 are Sunnis and 2/3 are Shiites. Over the last 20 years, you may have heard that there have been numerous attacks in mosques and markets there, bombs aimed solely at killing civilians. This hatred between Shiites and Sunnis, fighting for power, has been the cause of almost all these deaths. And perhaps you wonder about the color blue. Well, those are the Ibadis, who only live in Oman, and they get along well with everyone. They just chill with the Sunnis and the Shiites. Now it's time to return to Yemen, Notice that the green is very light. That's because the majority are Sunnis, but not all. As we can see, in this case, Sunnis make up 2/3 of the population and Shiites only 1/3. And here we can see how the Sunni and Shiite population is distributed on the map. Doesn't this map remind you of another one we saw at the beginning of the video? So, we are getting closer to the heart of the matter. We are starting to understand the religious factor of this conflict. But to fully understand it, we must go back in time a bit. Let's talk a little bit about history. In the early 19th century, the British Empire was in full expansion, and to connect the crown jewel India with the British Isles, fleets had to sail around the entire Africa. But what is now Yemen, just like today, was a rugged land with few opportunities. It rains little, the terrain is very rugged, and the soil is rocky and infertile, so many people turned to piracy. So in 1839, the British East India Company occupied the region to counter pirate attacks against British ships traveling to India. The Navy deemed Aden strategically important due to its location, making it the Aden Protectorate. But the significance of this colony increased after the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. The Suez Canal is an artificial waterway located in Egypt that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf of Suez in the Red Sea through the Isthmus of Suez. This canal has a length of 193 kilometers between Port Said on the Mediterranean coast and Suez on the Red Sea coast. Its opening reduced the maritime travel distance from the Arabian Sea to London by approximately 8,900 kilometers and made the Red Sea a strategic location for connecting Asia with Europe. And speaking of strategic matters, it's extremely important that if you're enjoying the video, you give it a thumbs up and subscribe. These types of videos involve extensive work in research, writing, narration, and editing. So your support with likes and subscriptions is crucial to help the YouTube algorithm recognize this as valuable content. Thank you very much. And this importance remains the same today. Virtually all ships traveling between Asia and Europe or North America pass through the Red Sea to then cross the Suez Canal. If you notice, the British colony coincides with what is South Yemen. So, what happened to the other part? Well, that area was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, a powerful Islamic empire centered in present-day Turkey. In March 1914, the Anglo-Turkish Treaty defined the border between Yemen and the Aden Protectorate, known as the Violet Line, which extended to the division between the Ottoman Vilayet of Yemen and the British Protectorates of Aden. When World War I broke out, the Ottomans and the British clashed. In the north, in what is now Saudi Arabia, there was an Arab revolt against the Ottomans that isolated their part of Yemen from the rest of the empire. The religious and tribal leaders of the region also rebelled against the Ottomans, who ultimately lost the World War. And one of the consequences was that the Ottoman Empire ended up dissolving. So, that's how, with the Ottomans leaving, the Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen was formed. This kingdom was founded as an absolute theocratic monarchy, with Islam as its religion, specifically Shia Islam. Because yes, if you notice, this region is exactly where the majority of the people are Shia, and it is also the same region where the Houthis are today. But that's not the end of it, because in the north, Saudi Arabia has just been founded, another absolute theocratic monarchy, but this time, Sunni. And in 1934, the war erupted over border issues between Saudi Arabia and the Kingdom of Yemen, a conflict that would ultimately solidify the modern borders. But this did not mean peace. In the Kingdom of Yemen, everyone was Shia, yes, but the king wanted to establish a hereditary monarchy, while other clans wanted an elective monarchy. In total, there were several internal clashes. This triggered the civil war, pitting Republican forces against those loyal to King al-Badr. The Republicans received support from the Republic of Egypt, while the forces loyal to the monarch received support from the kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and Jordan, both nations opposed to the new republic. Following the defeat of the king, this country would be popularly known as the Republic of North Yemen. Meanwhile, the British colony remained until the 1960s, at which point it was decolonized. It became a new state, the People's Republic of Yemen, which everyone would know as South Yemen. For nearly 25 years, both states were independent, and conflicts resurfaced. South Yemen became a Marxist-Leninist state supported by the Soviet Union, so now there were tensions on two fronts. The north was Shia and the south Sunni, and the south was communist while the north was not. And now, an important figure enters, Ali Abdullah Saleh, who became president of North Yemen in 1983. It's worth remembering his name. Surprisingly, with the collapse of communism in May 1988, the governments of North Yemen and South Yemen significantly reduced tensions through an agreement that included the renewal of discussions about reunification. Additionally, they agreed to establish a joint oil exploration zone along their undefined border, demilitarize the border, and allow unrestricted passage. In 1990, they reached a comprehensive agreement on joint governance, merging both countries into Yemen. That's how Yemen was born. But let's be honest. This, which sounds good on paper, unifying Yemen, looks bad. Because fundamentally, although both halves call themselves Yemen, history has shown us that they are different peoples, with completely different dynamics. Ali Abdullah Saleh, the former president of the North, who was Shia, became the first president of unified Yemen. And guess what? Independentist groups in the south immediately appeared. Groups that sought independence because their Sunni Islamic views were incompatible with the Shia perspective of the north. At the same time, another opposition group to Abdullah Saleh emerged. During the 1990s, under the guidance of religious leader Hussein al-Houthi. They accused Saleh of corruption and criticized him for his support from Saudi Arabia and the United States. And yes, the Houthis are named after Hussein al-Houthi's surname. We must understand that in many Arab countries, society is organized differently from our Western perspective. Here, we have our family, but it is a small family, children, parents, uncles, cousins, and it is difficult to have contact beyond that. Within the family, we have a lot of freedom. We can have different opinions and distance ourselves from it. But in more traditional countries, such as Yemen, all families are encompassed within large extended families of thousands of people, the tribes. All families belong to a tribe, and each tribe has a leader who basically dictates what the family can and should do. The leader approves marriages, secures employment, and also decides whom to vote for in elections or if the tribe should join any faction at war. And what the tribe decides must be followed because nobody is anything outside of their tribe. Everyone lives for and by their tribe. In this map, you can see the areas where the main tribes of Yemen reside. Tribes that, moreover, ally and feud with each other. And that brings us to the year 2004. Saleh ordered an operation to apprehend al-Houthi. After several months of clashes between Yemen's security forces and the Houthis, the government announced that he had been killed. But for Abdullah Saleh, the calm lasted less than 10 more years. In 2011, the Arab Spring erupted, a series of uprisings across much of the Arab world. Many thought that would mark the end of dictatorships and a new dawn for the region. But we were mistaken. Everything got worse. And Yemen is a prime example of this. The protests initially focused on denouncing unemployment, poor economic conditions, and corruption. later evolving into demands for the president's resignation. Massive defections from the army and government left much of the country outside government control. Finally, after about 20 years in power, Saleh announced his resignation in 2011 in exchange for immunity. Abderrahman al-Hadi assumed the position of the new president. Al-Hadi was originally from southern Yemen and was Sunni, but that did not prevent him from working for Saleh, whom he served as defense minister. But this not only did not deter the Houthis, but it actually motivated them even more, because now a person from southern Yemen who was also Sunni was in power. Between 2011 and 2012, the Houthis consolidated their control over the former North Yemen, which fell out of the government's control. In 2015, discontented with a proposal to divide the country into 6 federal regions, the Houthis seized the presidential compound in the capital Sana'a. This attack led to the resignation of President al-Hadi, but he only resigned to save his life as he fled the capital and delivered a speech asserting that the Houthi takeover was illegitimate and that he remained the constitutional president of Yemen. The civil war had begun. But how had a tribe managed to rebel so successfully against the government? Abdul Malik al-Houthi is the leader of the group. The way to garner support from other tribes is through agreements. These agreements are sometimes sealed through marriages, and other times there are economic interests involved. For example, the leader may propose to a certain tribe that, if they join them, they will be allowed to control a ministry of the government, or that they will manage the oil business or any other matter that brings money to the tribe. But, in addition, there is an external country that supports this group. Let's look at the map from before. Can you guess which major Shia country it might be? Exactly, Iran. Iran is the only major Shia country, but unlike Oman, it does not have a peaceful policy. Iran is a country with imperialist aspirations over its Sunni neighbors. It has bad relations with practically all its neighbors because it tries to influence them. And the other major country in the region that seeks to oppose it is Saudi Arabia. So, in the Islamic world, Saudi Arabia and Iran are the 2 major enemies. They are 2 powers that have been on the brink of war for decades and try to destabilize each other through diplomacy, espionage, and terrorism. And the conflict in Yemen is a golden opportunity for Iran, because if northern Yemen becomes independent, it would manage to have a religious ally in the region. And of course, for Saudi Arabia, having a state allied with Iran is akin to a pain in the neck. So in 2015, Saudi Arabia launched an air military campaign to end the Houthis and restore the Hadi government. The intervention aimed to recapture the capital and eliminate the Houthi threat. Saudi Arabia led a coalition of Sunni Arab states, which bombed numerous Houthi targets. But the operation failed because the Yemeni government failed to regain northern Yemen. Saudi Arabia has the most powerful army in the region, equipped with the most modern military equipment. In theory, the Saudi army, by invading the country, could have easily crushed the Houthis. But the reality is different. A ground intervention in northern Yemen would be very similar to what happened to the United States in Afghanistan. The enemy would blend in among the civilian population, making it impossible to identify them. And then a long campaign of insurgency and attacks that an army cannot win would begin. So Saudi Arabia decided not to intervene by land. Over the years, the conflict has become deadlocked, described as a military stalemate. In 2017, the Southern Transitional Council emerged, a group seeking independence for southern Yemen. Local branches of the Islamic State, and especially Al-Qaeda, have also emerged, fighting to impose their own vision of Yemen. And this is how we arrive at the current map. And now that we understand who the Houthis are, we still need to understand why they have begun to attack ships passing through the Red Sea. a place through which, no less than 30% of the world's container traffic passes. 4 of the world's leading shipping companies have announced the suspension of shipments through the Red Sea due to concerns about possible Houthi attacks. The oil giant BP has also taken the same measure, leading to an increase in oil and gas prices. These attacks force ships to take longer routes around Africa, increasing insurance costs and fuel expenses. As a result of the higher transportation costs, prices for everything transported by sea will rise. So, why do they attack ships? Well, in theory, it's all a response to this. Following the brutal terrorist acts by Hamas against Israel in October 2023, Israel initiated an equally brutal military campaign against the Gaza Strip. This is not the time to discuss the Arab-Israeli conflict, which we will address in another video, but you should know that the motto of the Houthis states the following: God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam. So, their peculiar revenge began in November 2023 when they hijacked a ship heading to Israel. In the following weeks, they have launched drones loaded with explosives towards Israel and have attacked several ships that, they claim, are heading to Israel or are somehow connected to Israel. And it's because the Houthis control the area that connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is only 30 kilometers wide. The ships pass so close to the coast that they are easily identifiable and can be attacked from land at high speed. So their intentions, apparently, are to launch a retaliation against Israel for the brutal military campaign that has taken place in Gaza. And I say apparently because we're going to see that this is just propaganda. The reality is that attacking a handful of ships will not economically sink Israel or anything similar. The handful of long-range drones they have launched cannot achieve anything either. Israel has a powerful anti-aircraft system that has destroyed several of them, and even the Saudis, who do not have good relations with the Jewish state, have shot down several drones. And they have shot them down because they know this is not about Israel. This is about Iran's intentions. The retaliation against Israel is just an excuse to garner support from the Arab world. But Iran is the one behind it all. The Houthis are an alliance of mountain tribes without modern war material. The drones they have launched are of Iranian manufacture, and so are the missiles. Iran has been arming the Houthis for years, and that is no secret to anyone. So it is Iran who is providing this weaponry to the Houthis because they seek to increase Arab countries' sympathy towards them, hoping to achieve a deal that seals the independence of northern Yemen, a Shiite state in the region, a friendly state from which to operate, a thorn in the side of Saudi Arabia. And mind you, we are not assessing whether it is ethical or not, nor are we saying whether Iran is good or bad. We are explaining the motivations that drive Iran to move the Houthis as if they were chess pieces. Furthermore, there could be a second reason, and that is that there could be a clear connection between the war in Ukraine and this crisis in the Red Sea. Listen carefully. Since the onset of the invasion, things have been going poorly for Russia, a country that has had to request ammunition and drones from Iran, one of its few reliable allies. Iran is making a lot of money exporting weaponry to Russia, but the war is lasting too long, and the economic strain on Russia is becoming brutal. Look, this is a chart of Russia's exports, showing in colors what the country exports. In dark brown are all the petroleum-derived products, which account for almost 2/3 of its exports. That is to say, the Russian economy largely depends on oil. And to sustain its military effort, Russia needs oil to remain at high prices. Only then can it generate substantial revenue and reinvest it in weaponry. Since the summer of 2022, oil prices have dropped significantly. So, it doesn't sound far-fetched that Russia may be the mastermind behind this destabilization in the Red Sea. Moreover, Iran is also threatening to block the Strait of Hormuz. This strait is a narrow sea passage through which all tankers from the world's major producers must pass: Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Such tensions, the mere threat of tanker attacks, always cause oil prices to rise. But we can also take it one step further. Because Russia knows that Ukraine is holding out thanks to military aid from its allies, such as the United States and European countries. These countries barely manage to produce enough ammunition to assist Ukraine. Stockpiles are nearly empty and production has not been revived. Think about it. Wouldn't it be in Russia's interest to create tensions in other parts of the world so that its allies cannot donate more weaponry to Ukraine? And it is precisely the United States and other European countries that have decided to send a fleet of warships to protect maritime traffic in the Red Sea with their anti-aircraft missiles. This forces the Allies to have to stockpile ammunition in case the situation gets out of control, as their first priority is to ensure that goods reach Europe to prevent an economic collapse. And every cruise missile that must be stockpiled just in case is one less cruise missile donated to Ukraine. Because the Houthis will never be able to win their supposed war against Israel. But if ammunition stops reaching Ukraine, it will indeed be Russia who wins its war. We find a clear relation. And you? With this, we come to the end of our overview of the crisis in the Red Sea. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you want to learn more, I recommend checking out some of the following videos. Also, if you have any ideas for other countries whose stories you'd like to hear, feel free to share them in the comments. Thank you very much, and take care.